topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
One day, almost 65 years ago, a man named Carl Stotts sat on his porch in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. He looked out on a field and saw kids playing sandlot baseball. That day could have been the best thing that happened for kids across America, or the worst. Carl Stotts decided to organize kids to play in a program called Little League Baseball. The program caught on like a wildfire. Soon leagues were formed across America, and soon parents got more involved than the kids had hoped for.
Call the play! Call the play!
While most kids had and continue to have a great time learning and playing the game of baseball, soon parents began to live vicariously through their kids, and bedlam broke out.
What'd she do? She did her job!
It wasn't until years later when Fred Eng questioned about these unrest situations and asked the question, why isn't someone doing something about this? Fred Eng did something about the behavior of overzealous coaches and parents in kids' sports. He created the National Alliance for Youth Sports.
Sports can be a tremendously powerful tool for impacting the lives of children. The research has been proven. We are about action. The National Alliance for Youth Sports provides training, memberships, programs, certifications, resources, and guides to help strengthen and improve community sports programs. Because better sports for kids means better kids for life. Join us at nays.org.
Morning, everybody. I guess you saw those coaches and parents behaving like they did, and you probably wondered, what do I know about all this? Well, let me give you an example of my background. I was a physical education teacher. I was a coach. I did everything until I became a director of sports for about 15,000 kids. And when I saw those programs, I saw coaches and parents all the time with all kinds of the worst behavior you could imagine. So that's why I created the program. And I'm happy today to have one of America's finest sports psychologists, Dr. Andrew Jacobs. He's going to join me today and talk about some of the things that we see. So, Dr. Jacobs, welcome.
Well, thanks, Fred. Great to be with you again.
What I want to ask you are a few questions. First one is, why do you think parents lose perspective like we saw in that video there?
I think a lot of it comes down to winning. You know, we're so obsessed in this country with winning, being number one. I mean, I'm in Kansas City. We've got the Super Bowl coming on this weekend, and obviously I want the Chiefs to win. We're obsessed with winning, and it filters down from the professional and collegiate levels all the way down to kids sports, and the perspective gets lost. It should be about having fun, learning skills, learning about communicating, getting along with people. But the parents are so obsessed with winning, it takes over what goes on.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. Sometimes you see some of the things that you see out there. And, you know, I tell a story one time. It was one of the worst that I've seen. And I'm anxious to hear what you think about this story. But a mother went to pick her child up at football practice, and she couldn't find him. And finally she sees the coach and she says, "Where's my son?" And he says, "She's in that car over there." He's in the car there. And she goes over to the car, and the car is running. She opens the door, the heat is turned up on high, and he's wrapped in plastic wrap. And she's like, "What are you doing? Get out of the car." And she's furious, and she runs over to the coach and says, "What are you doing to my child? He could have died in here with this kind of heat. He could have had heat exhaustion." And the coach said, "Well, he's a quarterback on our team, and we have rules in the league that says you have to weigh a certain amount. If you don't weigh that amount, he won't be playing quarterback for us." And she said, "My son's not playing on this team. You don't care about my son." So what do you think about that? It's crazy.
Well, that's child abuse, Fred. Plain, flat, and simple, that's child abuse. And I hope she took him off the team and reported him to the league, because that is abuse. And unfortunately, this happens a lot because of coaches' egos. I have a saying: a good coach checks his or her ego at the door, and a bad coach needs to see a sports psychologist. Good coaches are good psychologists. Bad coaches need to see sports psychologists. And that's because they're obsessed with winning. They're obsessed with results. Youth sports should be about having fun, learning skills, learning how to succeed and fail. And winning and losing should become secondary. That shouldn't become important until they're 12, 13, or 14. When they're playing at 7, 8, and 9, it should be about having fun and learning what it's like to win or lose. I co-wrote a book called Just Let Them Play, Guiding Parents, Coaches, and Athletes Through Sports, with Kansas City Royals Hall of Fame pitcher Jeff Montgomery, USA Swimming Hall of Fame coach Pete Malone. Our favorite chapter in here is Embracing Failure Can Lead to Fun. You're gonna fail. We fail at everything we do, but at the youth level, instead of being threatened by it or scared of it, you should learn to embrace it and learn it's part of what goes on. And rather than be scared of it, learn how you can get better from it. And when a coach's ego gets involved, it gets all taken out of context.
Now, you talk to a lot of parents, and I'm just wondering, I told you kind of one of the worst stories that I've heard. Have you heard any similar to that?
I've heard some bad ones. The one that comes to my mind first of all was a softball umpire in Mississippi who I ended up having on my weekly radio show. She was calling balls and strikes. A mom in the stands was getting on her about the calls, and got to the point where the umpire had to eject the mother because she was getting so abusive. When the umpire left the game, this mom came out of nowhere and punched her, gave her a black eye, and knocked her down. And then the mom took off, and she ended up getting caught and charged with assault. She was wearing a Mother of the Year T-shirt, which I thought was ironic. Yeah, I mean, this stuff happens all the time. I've got dozens and dozens of stories of these things where the parents got out of control. Another one real quick was after my weekly radio show, which was on a Saturday morning at the time. My oldest son he was 12 playing his soccer game. We went to his game, and as we got there, and the coach was a good friend of mine, we're walking up to the field. The game before us, a girls' game, was ending, and the sideline ref was running for his life because he'd been chased by a dad who then got tackled by two other dads. Our coach and I ran over to this young boy because our coach knew him and said, what's going on? He said, I was making the calls on the sideline. He didn't like it, and he started cursing at me. And then he said, I'm going to get you after the game, and came after me. And he goes, but I stood up for myself because I listened to a sports psychologist on the air that morning who talked about standing up for myself. I said, well, that was me. So he actually listened to my show. But here's a dad trying to physically tackle him.
He tackled you.
No, he wanted to tackle this young boy. And it goes on all the time. I hear this stuff every week in my office from different people calling my show or calling me up about these issues because it happens way too often.
Well, let me ask you this question. You talk to a lot of parents about these issues. Have you ever felt that you're able to talk to them like you talk to athletes? I mean, you've talked to Olympic athletes and, all kinds of professional athletes. Have you ever talked to parents about their behavior? And you can change professional athletes' thinking. Can you change parents' thinking?
Yes. I think if you put things in perspective. You can't change everybody, Fred. I mean, there are some people who are just so obsessed with winning and making their kids, my son's going to get a college scholarship. My daughter's going to play in the Olympics. There are some people who are obsessed with that, but I think most people, their kids are playing new sports to have fun and enjoy it. But unfortunately, almost always with every team or every organization, there's going to be one of those coaches or one of those parents who tries to ruin for everybody. And there needs to be better training for these people to understand the ups and downs of what coaching is about and what parenting is about. And that youth sports, and you know it as well as anybody, maybe better than anybody, it should be about enjoying the experience and having fun, not about the winning and losing.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. Speaking of winning and losing, remember the very first training program that we had for coaches. And I wondered whether this question would really resonate with you. And I asked these coaches, I said, what role do you think winning plays in youth sports? You gotta remember, these are the typical moms and dads that do the coaching. And I thought, wow, there's going to be all kinds of comments about, well, winning is everything and it's most important. And what are we trying to do? Raise a bunch of wusses So I'm curious, what role do you think winning plays in kids' sports?
Well, it plays a big role. And in my opinion, it shouldn't play any role until they're really 12 or 13. And there was a great article last summer where Roger Federer and Alex Morgan were quoted about how they played a number of sports. And it wasn't until they were about 14 when they focused on tennis and soccer, respectively, because they said they were just trying to have fun. I think winning the score, and it starts here in Kansas City, there's a soccer organization that has soccer tournaments for 2-year-olds. They're still wearing diapers. And it's because, it's about the money, because the youth sports has become a multi-billion-dollar business now. But the winning gets to the point where it becomes an obsession for some parents and some coaches, and they lose the perspective that you're out here trying to get these kids to learn some things and have fun and enjoy it. There's the burnout rate is over 75 to 80% of kids by the time they're 12, they quit because it's not fun anymore. Because they started playing when they were 4 or 5, they're done. They're tired of being yelled at, criticized, and told what they're doing wrong instead of enjoying the experience.
Yeah, it's amazing. That brings back a story. I remember when I first started the organization, we had a group of people from all over the country. A lot of them were heads of baseball organization, football, whatever. Didn't matter. But there was a magazine, it was called Young Athlete. It was a great magazine and had all these things about kids playing and the importance of what we're talking about, keeping things in perspective. And the guy that was the publisher of the magazine, his wife was there. And she happened to be sitting in the audience, and she raised her hand. She said, all of this that you're talking about, these coaches, I'm one of them, one of these parents in the stands. And it floored me. I thought, okay, what's she going to say? And she said, well, I went to a game one time with our kid playing baseball, and it was halfway through the game, and all of a sudden the umpire stopped. And he came over to the stands and he pointed at me and said, lady, one more comment out of you and you're out of here. And she said, I was mortified. I didn't know what I had done. And she said, but that wasn't the worst of it. About an inning later, he comes over and said, lady, out of here. And she said, I have never faced such humility in my life from something like that. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know I was being obnoxious and whatever. What do you think of that? What's your take on how
I think there needs to be better education programs for parents and coaches about the behavior at games, because a lot of parents are living vicariously through their kids. And this lady says she didn't know what she was doing. Well, obviously she was doing something, but she may think that the things she was saying were okay, but obviously they weren't. I mean, that umpire, I'm glad that umpire called her out. So there needs to be a better understanding of when you're in the stands, when you're yelling and screaming at your kids or other kids, they're kids. And you're throwing your own feelings onto them. And what happens is the burnout rate happens, kids quit, they don't want to play anymore. And the abuse carries over for years. One quick example was when my younger son was 11 or 12 at his rec baseball game, we were waiting to play our game. The game in front of us was going on from other kids from the neighborhood. Young man was at second base. The coach, third base coach, encouraged him to steal third. He tripped, fell on his face 2 steps into the steal, gets tagged out. The coach in the dugout turns around, kicks the fence. The bats and helmets fall off the bat rack, takes his hat, slams it down, grabs this young man by the neck and throws him against the fence. And I'm standing sitting behind. I said, hey, put him down. He then yelled some expletives to me as he dropped the young man. And the first base coach comes in and starts saying, what are you doing? This young man, when he was 15, his dad calls me and says, I need to bring Johnny in to see you. And he comes in, he's almost 6 feet tall, real athletic looking young man. He said, Dr. Jacobs, do you remember that incident? I said, oh yeah, I remember that very clearly. He said, ever since then, I've been scared to death. I have no self-confidence. All because a coach's ego would do something. And I reported that coach and he was suspended. I mean, that's physical. And he was an attorney on top of it. I mean, because their egos get caught up with the winning instead of the focus on enjoyment and having fun and learning skills.
Yeah, that's so funny that you mentioned all that. It's not funny, but so many times when I've been out speaking, and especially in the beginning of the organization, I had people like Little League and Pony Baseball and Babe Ruth and Pop Warner, all of them saying, what are you doing bringing out all this negative stuff? And I said, it's there. You got to face it. And we can't allow these abuses to take place. It's interesting. We do with the organization, you like this. Maybe the listeners and viewers will. We have a thing called the press box. And each week, our public relations person gets information from around the country. He sent me this one. This is just this week. I'm going to read the headlines for you. Miami youth basketball coach accused of exposing himself to a boy. A 26-year-old accused of sending 10-year-old pornographic video. That guy. Next one. A girls' wrestling season suspended due to parents' behavior. 2 egregious, unsportsmanlike acts at 2 different meets end the season. Next one. Baseball field shuts down. Former high school softball coach sued by a former player. 5 in custody after student athlete attacked with a pipe during a game. See, now, those things we see in the headlines, but, the amazing thing has always been to me, we send our kids to school. We have now even schools where they have to go through a detector because we're afraid who's there and who's coming in. And yet those same kids at 3 o'clock or whatever in the afternoon, they go out on a field and they're playing with a guy named Jack Jones that nobody knows anything about it, all due respect to Jack Joneses. But he could be a pedophile, he could be a terrible criminal and whatever. And it's the thing that we're trying to do and what you try to do in your work that's just needed so much across the country.
Well, there needs to be education for coaches and parents about their behaviors. Look, 98% of the coaches out there do a great job. But it's the 2%, the small percent, that's screwed up for everybody else. And when these things happen, who gets hurt by it? It's the kids. It's the kids. And that's why there needs to be better education for adults about their behaviors and the impact they have. I just turned 70 a little more than a month ago. When I grew up, we would go up to the grade school around the corner from my house. play sports till it got dark. You know, my friends and I, we'd go play 500. We'd play basketball, football. We'd play basketball at my house as well. Now you rarely see a group of kids out there playing unless they're at an organized sports practice. Everything's now there's safety issues today. They're more severe than maybe years ago, but at the same time, they're always being instructed what to do. The idea of play, kids playing and creating on their own, is going out the window because they're always being told what to do. And I think we need to give kids an opportunity to go out and play. I always tell coaches, ask them, do you ever have a practice where you just say, you know what, we're just going to go play today. I'm not going to coach you guys, just play, choose your sides and have some fun. How often does that happen? It doesn't happen much because, no, we've got to work on our drills. We've got to work on our shooting or our pitching or our hitting instead of just having fun. Fun, unfortunately, Fred, to me, is going out the window for a lot of these people because they're obsessed with winning, the trophies, the rewards, and the accolades they get as adults. And it hurts the kids in the long run.
No question about it. But you mentioned before 2% of the people act that way. And I believe 2% of the people act that way. However, I think there's a larger number that we never hear about. I'll give you an example. A judge, never forget, from Alabama, he was speaking at one of our conferences. And he told me afterwards, he said, I know what you guys are trying to do. He said, but let me give you an example of why people don't see all of this that goes on. He said, my wife and I are driving home. Our son had just played in a basketball game. And he's in the back seat. My wife turns to him and says, you know how much you embarrassed us today for the way you played? You were terrible out there. He said she kept jumping on him about this behavior that he was only trying his best. And that's the thing that I'm talking about. I'm talking about we parents. I'm not talking about other parents. We all have that feeling. That's our flesh and blood out there. And if the umpire or referee makes a mistake, we have this urge to jump on him. But there's a difference between what I call a difference between pushing our kids or shoving our kids. And that's what's happening with as parents that you know better than I do in their mindset that create this kind of behavior that we never hear about.
Well, what it does in the long term is it hurts these kids. And the one word that comes up all the time with so many of the people I work with is self-confidence. 2 words are self-confidence. And that gets affected by all this. And, you know, on the drive home, I always tell parents, don't start talking to your kids about the game. If they want to talk to you about it, that's one thing, but don't bring it up. Ask them where they want to go get something to eat, what do they want to do for some fun. You know, if they didn't play well, they're not going to be in a good mood. You don't want to berate them for not playing well. And plus, you're not the coach, you're the parent. And the thing I always encourage parents to say when you get in the car, gosh, it was great to watch you play today. I know it didn't go as well as you want, but I sure did love watching you play. Let them know you love them. Let them know you enjoyed it. And that's going to give them a better feeling about themselves rather than berating them and insulting them about why they struck out or missed a shot.
And that's a great way to end this session about that. I mean, that was really great. And I appreciate you being on today.
Well, as always, Fred, it's great being with you. You know, you founded this organization years ago because of the concern you've got for it. And you've been working on this for years. And I enjoy helping you out with it because there needs to be education and there needs to be more discussions about this behavior so we can try to correct it so kids can have fun playing sports and not quit by the time they're 10 or 11 or 12 because of wacko parents and coaches. So I want to thank you for getting started with this, Fred, because you've been a big motivator for me as well as helping people out.
Well, I thank you for that. And I know the other day you asked me how this thing ever gets started. I mean, it started from somewhere. And what happened, as I mentioned before in the intro, the fact that I was in charge of a program with 15,000 kids and I saw all this going on and I said to myself, somebody has to do something about it. So I did. And I created a training program for the first year with coaches of football and announced to all of the leagues and whatnot that their coaches would have to go through a training program. You would have thought, it was a riot in town. I mean, they just, you can't do this to us. We're volunteers. I said, yes, you can. You can go to this program. So they came to the program, and there was just a few there at the first. And I said, okay, what you need to do is you need to tell your assistant coaches and the people where you are that if your team wins a championship and you don't have a certified coach through our program, then you don't win the championship. So I said, next week will be the real first program. Guess how many showed up? Every single volunteer coach and whatever. And they went through the program. And the amazing part was, I didn't think it would happen, but they said, this was really good, because I had them talking to each other about the role winning play, why kids come out in the first place. So anyway, that's how it got started, Andy. But like I say, I'm really thankful for you because of your expertise, and look forward to talking to you in the future.
Well, anytime, Fred. I enjoy it.
Thanks again.
Thank you. Take care of yourself.
Okay, so you've heard it for this week, folks. And I hope you enjoyed it, because everybody needs to have this lesson if you're involved with your kids in sports. But I look forward to each week. We're going to do a different show, different people. But let me give you a list of the people we're going to be able to be hearing from. University of Connecticut basketball coach Danny Hurley. You may have heard of him. Former NFL tight end and Fox broadcaster Greg Olson. Yep, he'll be here. The 1924 Olympic gold medal wrestler Amit Etor. The Notre Dame women's basketball coach Neil Ivey. And ESPN, you've heard the name, Herb Kirkstreet. Yep. Those people are going to be part of our Better Sports for Kids program, and I hope you'll tune in every Friday morning at 11 a.m. Thanks.
This program is sponsored by Sir Durf Publishing in the interest for Better Sports for Kids, Better Kids for Life.
In this best-selling book, a child, while failing to live up to his father's expectations, is shamed and humiliated beyond belief. He vows to never allow his own son to face the same.